On March 15, 2007, at dawn, an emergency call rang through the dispatch center of the police department. The call reported a body found in an isolated house on the outskirts, with the victim in a strange condition. The body of Judge Alexander Ivanov was discovered in a dimly lit bedroom. Blood was scattered across the floor, and a fatal head wound had ended his life. The door to the room was tightly locked, and there were no signs of forced entry through the windows. However, on the floor lay a broken wine glass and a strange envelope beside the body. When the envelope was opened, it did not contain ordinary information. Everything gradually became clearer and more complicated, with a hurried, clear note written, "I knew you would choose justice over me." These words further heightened the tension in the room, making everything feel obscure. Who wrote this letter? And why did Judge Ivanov have to face such a choice? What caused such a powerful man to choose between justice and someone else? From the beginning, the investigators realized that this was no ordinary murder. Every detail pointed to a more terrifying truth, a dark story hidden behind the facade of a just legal system. The investigators could not stop searching for clues in the life and career of Judge Ivanov. From his secret private life to his little-known relationships, Alexander was not only a powerful judge in the legal field, but also the head of major cases involving corruption and political power. However, after analyzing the letters he had received over the years, the investigators began to realize a secret relationship between him and a person with superior power, a relationship that could have led to his death. The death of Judge Ivanov was not just the end of a life filled with power, but also the beginning of a much more complex case, filled with unimaginable relationships and secrets buried for years. How did a man who once held the position of the Supreme Judge fall into this trap? Who wrote the words in the envelope? And most importantly, who pushed him into a situation where he had to choose between justice and dangerous secrets, ultimately paying with his own life? This is not an ordinary murder case. This is a story of the internal struggle between power and morality, between justice and the secrets the legal system has always tried to conceal. The investigators, though just beginning their journey, understood that what they would uncover could change not only their lives but also the fate of an entire nation. Alexander Ivanov was a famous judge with great influence in the judiciary. Throughout his career, he became known for his strong will and resolute stance in cases involving corruption. No one could deny his credibility and fairness in delivering tough sentences to powerful criminals, despite pressure from the political sphere and corrupt relationships. With his unwavering rulings, Alexander became an ideal symbol of justice in the eyes of many. However, behind the image of a tough and fair judge, there lay a shocking secret few knew about. For over 10 years, Alexander had led a complex and contradictory life. In the light of justice, he maintained the image of a powerful and stern man. But in the shadows, he was a quiet man, weary with secrets he could never reveal. His secret same-sex relationship with Alexei Volkov, a powerful and ambitious politician, had been kept hidden for a decade without anyone knowing. And this was one of the factors creating tension in Judge Ivanov's life. He not only had to face battles in the courtroom, but also had to keep hidden a relationship that could destroy the career and reputation he had built over the years. The presence of Alexei in Alexander's life was an indelible mark, a secret that could never be made public, even though his integrity in his work was undeniable. The underground relationships, the dark political decisions, all formed part of a story no one could have expected. This relationship, with all its dark and dangerous secrets, played a role in creating one of the most shocking cases, and now all that remained were the doubts and the indelible traces. The meeting between Alexander Ivanov and Alexei Volkov took place at a political event where powerful and prestigious figures in the political sphere gathered. It was a lavish evening, with dazzling lights illuminating expensive outfits, but in the shadows of the banquet hall, an underground relationship was beginning to form. Alexei, with his handsome appearance and sharp political acumen, attracted the gaze of many at the party. But the moment he laid eyes on Alexander, a dignified, determined, and powerful man, Alexei realized this was an opportunity he could not miss. Their initial conversations were polite, but quickly shifted to deeper topics, as if they were both drawn into a different world, one where power and greed knew no bounds. With his cunning and intelligence, Alexei made Alexander feel captivated by his persuasive words and sharp viewpoints on politics and power. Although Alexander was a renowned judge, he perhaps did not realize that he was falling into a dangerous game where personal decisions could ruin both his career and reputation. From that moment, their relationship began to develop discreet and secret, yet deep enough to be difficult to sever. Both recognized that if discovered, not only would their careers be destroyed, but the dark secrets of politics would also be exposed. Therefore, this relationship, full of emotions, had to live in the shadows, hidden under the guise of public decisions and lives. They kept their relationship a secret, like a shadow, undetectable, unknowable. Everything began to change when Alexander was assigned as the judge in a major corruption case, with Alexei as the main suspect. This case was not just any ordinary case, but one of the most scandalous in the political history of the country. The evidence against Alexei was irrefutable: enormous unexplained assets, shady transactions, and clear proof of his corruption. But while the public was ready to convict Alexei, a proposal from his friend and lover put Alexander in a difficult position. Alexei, knowing his political career would be over if convicted, pleaded with Alexander to go easy on him. This plea was not just the weak words of a man about to lose everything, but also a veiled threat. If Alexander did not comply with his request, their relationship would be exposed, and all their secrets would be brought to light. A scandal would not only end the judge's career, but also cause Alexei to lose everything he had worked for over the years. Under the heavy pressure of both emotion and career, Alexander began to waver. He knew that his decision would not only affect justice but could also destroy his own life. Would he be able to maintain his stance on justice, or would he choose to conceal the truth in order to protect himself and his powerful lover? Alexander Ivanov stood silently in his office, his hands clenched into fists. The light from the fading afternoon sun cast dim streaks across the desk. Shadows gradually claimed the space. His heart felt like an hourglass, each passing second pushing him further into a past where all of his choices had led him down an irreversible path. Everything now depended on the decision he had to make in the coming days. And that choice, how could he face it? The biggest trial of his career was approaching. The corruption case of Alexei Volkov, whom he had loved for over a decade, was about to begin. And now he had to choose between his love for Alexei and his duty to the justice he had always upheld as the guiding principle in his life. Though he had always valued fairness and integrity, Alexander couldn't deny the feelings he had for Alexei. The dark nights they spent together, the promises they made, the moments when Alexei made him feel like the most important person in the world. But now, facing the truth, everything he had believed in seemed hazy. What was he to do when the one he loved was the enemy of justice? Every night, Alexander could do nothing but repeat this question in his mind. How could he protect the one he loved without losing himself? How could he maintain his ideals without becoming a traitor? The sleepless nights, the tired and anxious mornings, he searched for ways to delay the trial. But the more he searched for a solution, the more he felt trapped in a snare of his own making. One wrong choice, one irreversible decision, and everything would fall apart. Then came a day when he could delay no longer. Everything was in place, and there were only a few days left before the trial began. It was the time for a secret meeting between him and Alexei, 1 week before the trial. The cottage, where they had once escaped the suspicion of the outside world, would now witness an unavoidable confrontation. When Alexander arrived, Alexei was already waiting, his calm demeanor hiding a determination in his eyes. The two stood in silence for a long while, as if neither dared to break the tension in the air. When Alexei spoke, his voice was cold but carried an intense urgency. "You can't do this, Alexander. You're everything to me. I've done everything to help you get to this position. You won't abandon me, will you?" Alexei stepped closer, his fingers gently brushing a lock of Alexander's hair behind his ear. But that gesture only deepened the distance between them. Every word from Alexei felt like a knife to Alexander's heart, but he remained resolute, unwilling to let himself be swayed. "You've gone too far, Alexei. There are limits to everything. I can't forgive what you've done. You are part of this corruption. And if you refuse to take responsibility, I can't help you anymore." Alexei staggered back as though struck by a heavy blow. His face darkened. For a long time there was silence between them. Then, suddenly, Alexei grabbed Alexander's hand, his eyes burning with uncontrolled anger. "Who do you think you are, Alexander? Do you think you can protect all those fake ideals? What was I to you? Just a judge. Just someone who could be threatened. But you can't do this to me. You can't." Alexei's voice rang out like an explosion in the silent room. The threats, the collapse of their relationship that they had tried so hard to keep hidden, all seemed to burst out in an instant. But what was even more terrifying was the truth. Alexei wasn't just threatening his career. He was threatening the love and everything Alexander had believed in his entire life. Alexander gasped, trying to stay calm. Every word from Alexei felt like a deep stab to his heart. But he knew he couldn't keep backing down. He had to stand firm, even if it meant sacrificing everything. "You don't understand, Alexei," he sighed, his voice firm. "I can't keep going down this path. I can't stand by your side." The meeting ended in coldness, with no hugs, no promises like before. Only a distance that could not be bridged. Alexei left angrily, walking out of the cottage with disappointment clearly written on his face. Alone, Alexander felt like he had been torn apart. Every decision he made carried an irreplaceable pain. Deep inside, he knew that the road ahead had no way out. But what no one expected was that, after that meeting, Alexander, the man he had always thought would stand by his side forever, suddenly vanished. No one knew where he went, no trace, no message. Just silence. And when the police discovered Alexander's body, no one could understand what had happened. Alexander Ivanov, the man Alexei had once loved, the one he had sacrificed everything for, died in an unexpected way. Alexander's death was not just a case, it was a mental shock for everyone who had known him, especially Alexei. Suspicion about Alexander's death immediately arose, but what was even more frightening was that the evidence found at the crime scene only made everything more obscure. Was it a murder, or was there something deeper, something no one could explain? Who killed Alexander? Could it have been Alexei, in a moment of weakness and despair, who decided to end the life of the one he loved? Or was there some force behind it all, something that no one could even imagine? As the case began to reveal its mysteries, Alexei, now facing not only justice but also the choices he had made, realized that the price to pay for love and betrayal might be too high. When the investigation teams arrived at the crime scene, the atmosphere in the isolated house felt like an unshakable dark shadow. Although all the initial traces seemed to lead to a clear conclusion regarding the death of Judge Alexander Ivanov, there were strange, haunting details that the investigators could not overlook. At the scene, the police quickly discovered a broken wine glass on the floor near Alexander's body. Upon closer inspection, the investigators found the fingerprints of Alexei Volkov, the judge's secret lover, on the rim of the glass. While this undeniably implicated Alexei, it wasn't enough to conclude that he was the one responsible for the death. However, another piece of evidence, seemingly overlooked during the initial survey, pointed to something that could not be ignored: a distinct shoe print on the carpet near the body, which appeared to belong to someone with a different stature. This shoe print complicated things further, as it was not Alexei's but rather someone else with a different gait. The investigators began to suspect that the case might not be just a matter of a complicated romantic relationship between Alexander and Alexei. With these new findings, the police continued to investigate Alexei. However, a public event provided him with an irrefutable alibi. On the night of Alexander's death, Alexei had attended a public conference, with ample evidence proving that he could not have been at the crime scene. This created an inexplicable loop, forcing the investigators to look for a different angle. During the investigation, a surprising discovery further complicated matters. The investigators learned that Alexander was not only secretly involved with Alexei Volkov, but also had a relationship with Dmitry, a young investigative journalist. Dmitry, who had extensive knowledge of the corruption case that Alexei was the prime suspect in, had been in contact with Alexander throughout the trial. This led the investigators to reconsider the entire picture. Dmitry had a clear motive. As a journalist, he was attempting to expose the secrets that Alexei was hiding. A relationship between a journalist and a judge was not just a coincidence, it could have been part of a plan to uncover the secrets of the powerful political system Alexei represented. But the romance between Dmitry and Alexander was something unexpected. Through phone exchanges and emails collected by the police, they found that Dmitry had met with Alexander on the night of the incident. Their meeting took place in the dark of the isolated house where Alexander had once been with Alexei, but this time only Dmitry was present. Their conversation was not about the corruption case, nor about politics or the trial. Instead, it was filled with painful whispers, buried secrets from years past. What was shocking, however, was that when the police followed Dmitry's trail, they discovered something terrible. Dmitry had approached Alexander in an abnormal state. They didn't just discuss the corruption case, but also a personal issue that had been tormenting Alexander. In a moment of despair, Alexander had revealed all of his secrets about his relationship with Alexei, secrets he had never shared with anyone else. Dmitry, who had heard those confessions, felt no sympathy. On the contrary, a deep-seated hatred had built up inside him. Dmitry was not just an investigative journalist, he was a jealous man craving fame and power. And when Alexander revealed his relationship with Alexei, the very relationship Dmitry had always believed he could never have, the jealousy within Dmitry exploded. On the last day of the investigation, when everything seemed to be coming to light, a horrifying twist sent shockwaves through the entire system. The investigators, upon further scrutiny, discovered video footage of the conversation between Dmitry and Alexander. These videos revealed an undeniable truth: Dmitry was the murderer. In these videos, a peak of tension erupted. Driven by hatred and jealousy, Dmitry had killed Alexander, not only to end the relationship but also to create a major political scandal. Terrifyingly, in his desperation, Alexander had disclosed all his secrets to Dmitry, including his relationship with Alexei. Instead of protecting Alexander, Dmitry, with his dark motives, had planned to kill the man he had once loved, all because of jealousy and ambition. The death of Alexander Ivanov was not just a simple murder. It was a series of complex events revolving around power, love, and betrayal. And in this case, Dmitry, who everyone had thought was just a journalist, turned out to be the mastermind behind the scenes, creating an unimaginable twist. With this discovery, the investigators closed the case, but it raised a larger question. How could someone be dragged into the darkness of hatred and jealousy to the point where they were willing to kill the one they had loved for so long? After weeks of investigation, clues gradually came to light. The relationship between Alexander, Alexei, and Dmitry was not a simple story. It was complicated, dark, and full of secrets that only the people involved could truly understand. The love between Alexander and Alexei, a relationship that had lasted for over a decade, was a secret story that only a few people knew about. They first met when Alexei was a rising, ambitious politician, while Alexander was already a well-known judge, respected for his strictness and decisiveness in corruption cases. Both men knew that this relationship could never be made public, as their careers would be ruined if anyone found out. They loved each other in their own way: secret evenings at quiet retreats, trips just to escape the outside world together. They could not openly express this love, but the attraction between them was undeniable. Every time they were together, they became more connected, but this also meant they had to hide it even more. Alexei, the man with grand ambitions, once told Alexander that this relationship was the only thing that made him feel truly free, because outside of their conversations, he had no one else to confide in or seek comfort from. However, Alexander's life was not just about Alexei. Another figure, Dmitry, a young and intelligent investigative journalist, entered his life like a storm. Dmitry knew a lot about the major corruption case in which Alexei was involved. He was not only an excellent investigative reporter, but also someone with a very close relationship with Alexander. The relationship between Dmitry and Alexander was not just a professional one. It had evolved further. Dmitry, with his tact and decisiveness, quickly gained Alexander's trust. They had long conversations, sometimes in Alexander's office, sometimes in a quiet cafe, where questions about justice, corruption, and betrayal were raised. Dmitri knew about the secret relationship between Alexander and Alexei, and this sparked an indescribable feeling of jealousy in him. He always felt pushed aside, like a peripheral figure in a relationship that had no room for him. However, the feelings between Dmitri and Alexander were not just friendship. There were moments, lingering glances, awkward words that neither of them could fully express. Dmitri gradually became part of Alexander's life, even though he knew his relationship with Alexander would never be acknowledged. As time went on, Dmitri became increasingly frustrated and uneasy with the relationship between Alexander and Alexei. He could not stand witnessing the love between the two men, especially when he felt like an outsider in their secretive affair. The relationship between Alexander and Dmitri grew tense. The long conversations no longer felt the same. Instead, there were arguments, unanswered questions, and sometimes long silences full of unease. Dmitri felt that he deserved to be loved, and the jealousy over Alexander's relationship with Alexei grew unbearable. He was not just jealous because of love, but also because of the injustice he felt he had to endure. Many times Dmitri thought about exposing everything, revealing the truth about the relationship between Alexander and Alexei, but then he would stop, knowing that doing so would only lead to everything falling apart. However, that restraint did not last long. One day, in a moment of intense anger, Dmitri decided that he would no longer hold back. Dmitri's feelings for Alexander had turned into hatred. He wanted to destroy their relationship, not only because of love but also because of the injustice he felt. He wanted Alexei to pay for everything he had done. And so, a wrong decision was made, a decision that would lead to Alexander's death, a person Dmitri could no longer share his affections with. Alexander's life, once full of secrets, now became even more complicated and murky than ever. The men in his life, Alexei and Dmitri, not only loved him but also sought to destroy him as their emotions turned sour. The price of love, betrayal, and jealousy led to a tragic ending no one could have foreseen. A pesar de no ser el culpable, Alexei Volkov, el hombre poderoso y ambicioso, enfrenta un colapso inevitable. La relación secreta de más de una década entre él y Alexander Ivanov, una relación que ahora ha sido expuesta bajo la luz de la gestión, se ha convertido en el centro de atención pública. Las fotos, las pruebas irrefutables sobre su amor, junto con las acusaciones previas de corrupción, han destruido por completo la imagen de Alexei ante los ojos del público. De un político destacado, ahora se ha convertido en una persona marginada cuya carrera y reputación se han derrumbado. Su historia no solo ha arruinado la vida privada de Alexander, sino que también ha destrozado todas las fuerzas de Alexei para mantener la imagen de un líder íntegro, un defensor de la justicia. En las entrevistas, Alexei intenta justificar, insistiendo en que no tiene nada que ver con la muerte de Alexander, que su amor por Alexander no fue la razón de su pérdida de juicio. Pero esas palabras ya no convencen a nadie. Todos lo miran con desconfianza, y cada palabra que sale de solo lo pone en una situación más incómoda y desesperada. El sufrimiento de Alexei no solo proviene de la pérdida de un ser querido, sino también de los errores del pasado que no puede corregir. Por otro lado, Dmitri, quien jugó un papel crucial en la muerte de Alexander, finalmente no puede escapar de su culpa. En el tribunal, cuando lo acorralaron, Dmitri ya no pudo seguir negando. Con una expresión de agotamiento y arrepentimiento, admitió su acto. Pero lo que sorprendió aún más no fue su confusión del crimen que había cometido, sino las declaraciones que hizo después. Dmitri no solo admitió haber matado a Alexander por la traición, sino que reveló toda la verdad sobre la relación entre Alexei y Alexander. Reveló que Alexei había usado esa relación como una herramienta de poder, aprovechándose de Alexander para ocultar sus propios actos de corrupción. En un arrebato de furia y odio incontrolables, Dmitri mató a Alexander con la intención de crear un escándalo que debilitara completamente a Alexei. Su testimonio dejó en silencio todo el tribunal. Todos quedaron sin aliento ante la revelación de un secreto inesperado. La verdad que Dmitri sacó a la luz no solo desenmascaró oscuros complots, sino que también puso a Alexei frente a una pérdida de la cual no podría recuperarse. El caso no solo causó revuelo en la política, sino que también se convirtió en un tema candente en la opinión pública. La historia de la muerte de Alexander Ivanov, su relación homosexual con Alexei y las revelaciones de Dmitri se convirtieron en el tema principal de los debates. Los comentaristas sociales no dejaban de criticar cómo el poder puede de la verdad, cómo una persona puede manipular todo el sistema para proteger su imagen. Pero lo más notable fue la discusión sobre la moralidad y el juicio social hacia las relaciones homosexuales en las élites. Los homosexuales en la política y el poder ya no son fantasmas en la oscuridad, sino personas juzgadas, obligadas a enfrentar al público. La opinión pública no solo se centró en Alexei y Dmitri, sino también en una sociedad con valores conservadores que enfrenta un cambio. Pero, ¿está la sociedad lista para aceptar una verdad tan dolorosa? Podemos ser tolerantes con aquellos que han estado ocultos bajo capas de poder, ambición y traición. La muerte de Alexander Ivanov no solo es la muerte trágica de una persona, sino una advertencia sobre el secretos y los secretos que pueden destruirlo todo. Esta historia no termina con lo que sucedió, sino que plantea una gran pregunta sobre el juicio social hacia relaciones que no pueden aceptar. Lo que Dmitri y Alexei causaron no solo hizo que se sacrificara una vida, sino que también manchó todos ideales y esperanzas en los que la gente cree en la justicia. Y al final, cuando toda la verdad sea revelada, debemos preguntarnos, ¿vale la pena el precio que se paga por estos secretos?